Officer Derek Mallory spoke with the confidence of a man who believed no one would challenge him. He told the court how he had found Evelyn Carter loitering near a closed hardware store, how she became aggressive when questioned, how she struck him in the chest and tried to grab his weapon. The courtroom listened, their faces a blend of curiosity and disbelief. "She was hostile," he said, voice even and clear. "I gave her every chance to cooperate." He paused, allowing his words to settle like dust in the silence. "I feared for my safety." He said it plainly, deliberately, and some heads in the courtroom nodded, almost automatically. It was the kind of story they had heard before, too many times. A lone officer, an uncooperative suspect, a threat, a reaction. Borland. But Evelyn didn't react. She sat still, her face unreadable, her hands never moving from her lap. Her attorney, Marcus Reed, young and slightly green, whispered, "He's twisting it. We both know it." Evelyn finally turned her head. "Stay calm. He'll overplay it." And Mallory did. As he described Evelyn allegedly lunging toward his firearm, the drama in his voice edged into something theatrical. The room stirred. But even more telling was Evelyn's gaze. Steady, focused. She wasn't just listening. She was observing, studying every twitch in Mallory's hand, the way his voice trembled when no one else noticed. Have you ever watched someone lie about you right in front of others and known you couldn't interrupt? Not yet. When Mallory returned to his seat, he smirked again, a little less certain than before. His fellow officers in the back row chuckled quietly, emboldened by his performance. But they didn't notice Evelyn's quiet nod to her lawyer. The performance was over. Now it was time for the truth. Sometimes, the boldest lies don't collapse under pressure. They collapse under patience. The courthouse was old, its walls lined with dark oak, its floor polished to a dull sheen by decades of footsteps, justice, and judgment. On that particular morning, the room felt colder than usual. Outside, the sun filtered through tall windows, but it didn't chase away the chill. The pews were filled with curious locals, reporters hunched over notebooks, and a few quiet faces tight with concern. At the defendant's table sat Evelyn Carter. Her hands were gently folded in her lap, her posture upright, as if taught by years of discipline. She wore a simple white blouse, black slacks, and low heels. Nothing flashy. Her hair was braided neatly, her face composed. There was no visible fear, no anger, just silence. But there was something else, something that drew the eye and made you wonder. Who was this woman, really? Across the aisle, Officer Derek Mallory sat with a casual confidence that came off as smug. In his pressed uniform and polished boots, he looked every bit the part of a seasoned officer. He leaned back, smirking, the picture of a man who thought the verdict was already in his pocket. After all, who would question the word of a white police officer over that of a black woman accused of assault? Then the judge entered, and the room rose as one. The gavel struck, echoing like a shot through the air. The case was called. State versus Evelyn Carter. And Evelyn? She didn't flinch. She rose with quiet grace, nodded once to her attorney, and stood tall as her name was read aloud. But underneath that calm, what was she hiding? Who among us hasn't felt judged by appearances before the facts are known? Have you ever walked into a room and known, just known, that someone had already made up their mind about you? The opening statements began, and Officer Mallory took the stand first, full of conviction, delivering his account with polished ease. His story? A disturbance call, a hostile woman, an officer forced to act. It all sounded too clean, too rehearsed. Evelyn watched him closely. She didn't blink. Then as the courtroom listened, no one yet knew that everything they believed was about to be shattered by the woman who sat so still, so silent, and so ready. Sometimes it's the quietest soul in the room that carries the loudest truth. Officer Derek Mallory thought he could get away with it. Again. He saw Evelyn Carter, alone on a quiet street, and decided her silence meant weakness. He shoved her, accused her, and lied under oath. But when they picked Evelyn, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know she was a retired Navy SEAL, decorated, disciplined, and deadly calm. What came next wasn't just justice, it was exposure. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one woman, it's about all of us. Sunlight filtered through the courthouse blinds, casting long shadows across the polished wood floor. The air inside was heavy with tension. Spectators leaned forward on hard benches. A single woman sat at the defense table, quiet but unshakable. And across from her, the officer who once smirked now began to sweat. The battle for truth had begun, and Evelyn was just getting started. When Evelyn Carter took the stand, the room shifted. Something invisible but undeniable passed through the air, like a breeze before a coming storm. She walked slowly, with measured grace. No grand gestures, no dramatics, just presence. As she adjusted the microphone, even the judge leaned slightly forward. "Miss Carter," the prosecutor began, already sharp, "can you explain your actions on the night of your arrest?" "I can," she replied, her voice even, "but first, I need to say that Officer Mallory's version is not only inaccurate, it's deliberately misleading." A quiet gasp rippled through the room. The prosecutor blinked. "A bold claim," he smirked. "Do you have proof?" Evelyn looked him straight in the eye. "I believe the truth will speak for itself. Just give it time." And then she began. She told them how she had pulled over to check her phone for directions, how Mallory had approached with his flashlight shining directly in her eyes, questioning her presence without cause, how she had calmly asked why he wanted her ID, and how, when she questioned him, he grabbed her arm and said, "Women like you need to learn to listen." The words fell heavy into the silence. There was no shouting in her story, no fighting, no struggle, only one woman trying to stand her ground without violence. Have you ever been punished, not for what you did, but for who someone thought you were? The prosecutor shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. "No body cam footage," Evelyn added, "because it just so happened to malfunction that night." Her attorney rose slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "we have additional evidence to present." That was when murmurs turned into open speculation. But Evelyn? She simply looked forward, her face calm. She knew what was coming next. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be heard. That evening, as the courthouse lights dimmed and the halls fell quiet, Evelyn Carter sat across from her attorney, Marcus Reed, in the warmth of her modest home. Her living room was simple, clean lines, family photos, one framed certificate from a long-ago military ceremony. A folded American flag rested on the mantel. Marcus leaned forward, tense. "I need to know, Evelyn. The judge senses it, the prosecutor feels it. Mallory?" He's nervous. "What are you holding back?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood, walked to a bookshelf, and pulled down a leather folder. Time had worn its edges, but the contents were crisp, preserved. She handed it to him without a word. Marcus opened it slowly. Commendations, deployment orders, discharge papers, Navy insignias, and there, her rank. And he looked up, stunned. "Lieutenant Commander, you were a Navy SEAL?" Evelyn nodded. 20 years, multiple combat tours. I led men through fire. The silence between them was not of shock, it was reverence. "Why didn't you say this before?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "Because it's not about who I was," she said, steady. "It's about who he thought I was." Mallory didn't see a veteran. He didn't see a woman trained in strategy and survival. He saw someone to dominate, someone voiceless. Her gaze didn't waver. "Do you understand now why I had to wait? We only get one moment of truth, Marcus. It has to land like thunder." Have ever held back part of your story, knowing it was the only thing powerful enough to turn a tide? Marcus leaned back, breathless. This changes everything. Yes, she said softly. And tomorrow, the courtroom will finally see me, not as a defendant, but as a woman who defended this country, only to be threatened on her own street. She looked out the window. Sometimes the strongest armor is simply knowing who you are, and waiting until the moment is right to show it. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Whispers buzzed through the gallery like static as Evelyn Carter stepped inside, her head held high. She wore a crisp navy blazer, the kind of jacket that hinted at discipline without declaring it. Her gaze was calm, but not soft. Her walk was slow, but not hesitant. She was ready. Officer Mallory, on the other hand, looked different. The smirk was gone. His eyes scanned the jury too often. His fingers tapped nervously on the table. The tension was thick enough to hold its breath. Evelyn took the stand once more. This time, Marcus stood taller, his voice sharper. "Miss Carter," he said, "would you please tell the court your full background?" She didn't blink. "I am Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Carter, retired, United States Navy SEAL, 20 years of service." A collective gasp. A beat of silence. Even the judge leaned back, stunned. "During those years," she continued, "I learned how to read danger, how to stay calm under pressure, how to protect life, even when mine was on the line. I used those skills that night, not to fight, but to stay still. Have you ever had to use your strength not to strike, but to stand still and survive?" The jury listened now with new ears. Marcus followed with the final blow. Body cam malfunctions. A bystander's video showing Mallory shoving Evelyn. The absence of resistance, and the tone of a man used to power unchecked. Then came the personnel records. Complaints, misconduct, buried incidents. The image of Officer Mallory began to crumble, not from any one strike, but from the quiet accumulation of truth. And Evelyn? She didn't smile. She simply waited. Because justice, when it's close, doesn't need celebration. It needs silence, and a steady breath to carry it home. The courtroom was silent, so silent you could hear the soft creak of a bench when someone shifted nervously. Evelyn Carter stood beside Marcus as the jury returned, faces unreadable. The foreperson, a woman with silver-streaked hair and steady hands, held the verdict in one folded sheet. "Has the jury reached a decision?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor." The paper was unfolded, words spoken clearly. "We find the defendant, Evelyn Carter, not guilty on all charges." A collective exhale. A tremor of applause. A gavel struck hard, calling for order. But Evelyn didn't cheer. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, letting the weight of it pass through her. Beside her, Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Furthermore," the foreperson added, "we recommend a full investigation into Officer Mallory's conduct." Now it was Mallory who stood frozen, his jaw clenched, eyes darting toward the back of the courtroom, where the support of his peers had thinned to silence. Justice had spoken. Have you ever stood in the same room where someone once tried to break you and watched the truth rise instead? Outside, the cameras waited. Reporters rushed forward, but Evelyn paused on the courthouse steps. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and low. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about all those who don't wear medals but still get misjudged. All those who are stopped, questioned, and silenced, not for what they do, but for who they are." A murmur of respect rolled through the crowd. She didn't stay long. She didn't need to. Months later, Mallory would lose his badge. More complaints would surface, and Evelyn, she returned to her quiet life, not to forget, but to remind. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like thunder. Sometimes it's the steady step of a woman who simply would not bow. And maybe that's the real lesson. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just steady. The heart of Evelyn Carter's story reminds us of a quiet truth. Strength doesn't always roar. It often stands still, patient, and unwavering. In a world that can misjudge us by the way we look, where power is sometimes abused and truth takes time to rise, it is easy to feel discouraged. But Evelyn shows us something timeless. Dignity is not something others can give or take. It's something we carry inside. No matter your age or history, each of us holds stories others may never see. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage is simply staying true to who you are, even when the world tries to tell a different version. Have you ever been misjudged, misunderstood, or quietly overlooked? If so, take heart. The truth has its own rhythm, and when it comes, it doesn't need noise. It just needs a voice willing to speak it, even softly. Let Evelyn's quiet strength remind you it's never too late to stand tall, speak gently, and let truth do its slow, certain work. Justice, like healing, takes time, but both are worth the wait. Evelyn Carter didn't raise her fists or shout for attention. Instead, she stood still in the wind outside the courthouse, eyes closed, face lifted to the sky. No cameras captured that moment. No headlines praised it. But in that silence, there was power. The kind that comes from surviving, from telling your truth, and from refusing to let bitterness win. Her life didn't return to what it was before. It grew into something deeper. She spoke at schools, at quiet gatherings, and in living rooms where people still whispered about justice. And slowly, the truth she stood for began to echo, reaching ears that had long been closed and hearts that had long gone numb. Some fights aren't about winning. They're about remembering, about making sure that when lies are told again, someone will be there to say, "I remember what happened last time." If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.